Is writer-director Bishal Dutta to talk about his feature film debut, It Lives Inside, just in time for the spooky season. You wrote and directed It Lives Inside. What inspired you to make this story and to tell it now?
Well, I felt like there was an opportunity to do a movie about a very interesting conflict I felt growing up, which was I felt caught between kind of two worlds as an Indian American. And I felt like it was only when I kind of synthesized those two identities that I could really be comfortable in my own skin. And at the same time, there were so many kind of ghost stories from my childhood that were passed down through kind of generations of my family. My grandfather especially had all these kind of spooky ghost stories. I felt like there was an opportunity to do a movie that would be very resonant about that particular conflict, but to frame it within a very kind of universally scary horror story would be a very exciting opportunity.
Talk about your casting process and working with such a stellar cast.
I was so lucky with the actors that I had on this movie. I mean, so much of my job as a director is just to pick the right actors and then sit back and let them do their thing. Megan Suri leads the film. Her performance really is the kind of anchor of the film. And she was the first person I talked to for the role. And I talked to so many other people, but I just couldn't get her out of my mind for the role because I think she has this incredible sort of balance of vulnerability and this sort of action star appeal. And that transformation that she brings to the film is so far beyond what I imagined it could be. And I try to write the script as kind of dialogue heavy and as surface as possible. And when the actors come on board, that they bring a lot of that like depth and reality to it. And I think Megan certainly did that to the point where I could pull a lot of lines out and just kind of live in those close-ups of her where she's expressing so much. And I felt the same way about Neera Bajwa, Betty Gabriel, Vic Sahay, Gage Marsh, Mohana Krishnan, who plays Tamira. I was just very spoiled on this movie with a lovely cast that brought it to life, in such style.
Your love of 80s horror movies is very evident in the film. Love the practical effects. Tell me about your process of picking practical effects versus visual effects, and how did you weave those two together for your film and crafting a horror film?
Absolutely. I mean, I was so in love with so many of those 80s horror films. And for this one in particular, I was thinking about stuff like Hellraiser, the reanimation of the Frank character. I was thinking of the end of The Fly, Nightmare on Elm Street, Pumpkinhead, Stan Winston's monster is my favorite monster in history. And I felt like I wanted that same sort of texture, that same sort of feeling. This, I think it's a very visceral feeling that you get that something is in front of a camera and it was filmed in a real space. With that said, I think visual effects are an incredible tool, but that's what they are, as a tool. And I felt that there's so much that would come from shooting this thing, a practical monster, and then adding CGI to it afterwards, building on a foundation, a photoreal sort of foundation, and building on it with VFX. That's kind of how I want to do it. That's the discipline that I think leads to the most compelling images.
There are countless possession movies, haunting movies. What did you do to make your film unique?
I think a lot of it came back to that central conflict, the sort of bifurcation of identity. And that felt like within the context of what would be a very familiar kind of love letter to horror movies. It was always my intention to do that kind of love letter, but it felt like there was a very interesting human story to tell within it. And for example, the relationship between Sam and her mom, I felt like they were both on two different sides of this conversation. And I didn't want to say either one of them was right, but I wanted them to meet in the middle to find a real solution to the problem. And so those kinds of elements I thought would provide this kind of unique experience, this unique human experience against a familiar background.
What does it mean to you to have that kind of representation of a Desi South Asian family? But it's a very universal story in terms of themes and the themes such as family, fitting in high school, friendship, but you also have that cultural element too.
Well, I'm so glad you said that because certainly the intention was to make a movie that would resonate universally. It felt like today so many people are caught between different worlds, trying to sort of balance their different identities and harmony. And so we felt like the more specific I got with the movie, the more universal it started to feel. But with that said, I mean, it makes all the difference to look up on the screen and see what feels like my family on the screen. And we really tried to focus on, rather than ever intellectualizing it or being didactic about it, I really just wanted to immerse an audience inside the world that I kind of grew up in. And that's, you know, our approach to the language is very kind of matter of fact. Sequences like the puja party, where I really wanted to drop you in the middle of all this festivity without any kind of explanation and just let the audience live there. So a lot of it really came down to, there were these memories that I had of growing up in these kinds of environments, and I wanted to capture them in as immersive and evocative a way as humanly possible, so that viewers like me can look at it and really feel kind of transported, but then other viewers can look at it and go, wow, I'm really inside of this space, inside of this family in a way that I never imagined I would be.
Were there any happy accidents on set where something did not go as planned, but it actually turned out for the better?
100%. I love talking about this one because I think it's such a great example of what makes filmmaking so great. We had really planned out the movie, and we had a very strong sort of sense of what we were going to shoot in the time that we had. And we prepped the movie in Vancouver in the summer, and it was perfect skies all the time. And then when we started shooting, it was just rain nonstop. And this movie wasn't supposed to have any rain in it whatsoever. And so we were just fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And one day I was talking to my DP Matt, and I was like, there's no way to get rid of this rain. We don't have fly swatters big enough for this. We just can't do it. And he didn't say anything. He just had one of his guys take one of the lights and shine it into the rain and just fully illuminate it. And it was like, it was so beautiful that we said, you know what, we're just going to embrace it. We're going to, you know, piece it together in the edit. We had to add maybe one or two CGI rain shots, but other than that, all the rain is kind of the real rain that we got. And it adds so much to me, you know, for me, to the aesthetic of the movie. It adds so much to that kind of mood of the movie. So it's a great example that you always, you know, always need to embrace those happy accidents.
Yeah, it gives you that, you know, fall, moody, gloomy weather, ever present vibe for sure.
For sure.
And now, actually, you've had quite a successful festival run. You've had different screenings across the globe. What does it mean to you now, and how do you feel about you're going to have a theatrical release for your first feature film?
It is a dream come true, and it's absolutely surreal. I mean, today, this kind of release is not something that I take lightly, and it really is a testament to our partners at Neon that they are working so hard to get an audience to see the movie. And it's that kind of relationship that I always crave with the distributor. And, you know, the theatrical experience of going to a movie is something I cherish. It's why I made this movie in the first place, because I've sat in on my favorite horror movies and felt the energy of a crowd. I've screamed and I've laughed, and, you know, I've forced my parents to watch some of these things, and I've left halfway through, you know, and that is a magic. And so I think the biggest honor I feel is just to be part of that lineage and to be able to bring that kind of movie to an audience. It's a real privilege.
And speaking of bringing it to an audience, last question, what do you hope audiences take away from your film?
Well, first and foremost, I hope it scares them, because the movies that scared me when I was younger scared me so deeply that they still stick with me. And that's what I love about the horror genre, is how deeply it can get under your skin. But beyond that, I think for audiences that are going for a little bit more, I hope that it's a movie that encourages them to find harmony within all the things that they are. And if it's a movie that can help anybody, even a single person, say, okay, I accept myself a little bit more than I did before I watched this movie, I mean, that would leave me a very, very happy filmmaker.
It Lives Inside comes to theaters Friday, September 22nd. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to follow Diya TV on social media so you can be up to date on all the latest film behind the scenes. I'm your host, Carrie Lane, and we'll see you next time.